Hey guys, Lewis from Recycle Bicycle Sales here. In today's video, we're going to talk about how to remove and install your Shimano cranks off of your bicycle. So firstly, what are the cranks? Well, the cranks are this part that sit right here. They're sort of this two-piece part. They've got a crank arm on drive side and a crank arm on non-drive side. What we're going to do is pull them apart so that we can pull them off of the bike. Okay, why would you want to remove and install your cranks? Well, I'm also going to make the assumption that the fact that you've clicked on this video means that you probably already have a reason why you want to remove and install them. But if you're just bored on a Sunday afternoon and want to pull them off, that's also awesome too. Let me run you through a couple of reasons why I would say that you might want to remove and install the cranks. One might be that you just want to give it like a really good clean inside and out, perhaps re-grease the bottom bracket, replace the chain rings perhaps, or even just re-grease the chainring bolts. There could be a multitude of different reasons, but I suppose the main one would be to re-grease the bottom bracket would be the first one that comes to my mind. So what tools do we actually need to be able to take our cranks off? Well, it's actually only two tools, but one of them is incredibly specific. It's a Shimano crank install tool. It's this little star-shaped tool that fits perfectly into this plastic little lock ring. The fact that it's plastic means it's very fragile, so it's incredibly important to have the correct tool for the job here. And 5mm Allen key. Having a little prick is going to help a lot. It's not necessary, but it will make the job a little bit easier as well. So if you happen to have a prick, cool. If you don't have one yet, don't buy one just to do this though. I also recommend using some gloves because this part can start to get a little bit messy. Now we're ready to take our crank off. For the purpose of this video, I'm just going to turn the bike around the other way so that you can see what's happening on the non-drive side, because that's where the tools are, or sorry, the bolts are that we're going to be undoing. Let's grab our two little trusty tools and get to work. Our 5mm Allen key is going to undo two different bolts. We've got one that's up here and one that's down the other side here. All that they are is pinch bolts. So we just have to loosen them quite a bit. We don't have to take them all the way out. We just have to loosen them a bit. It doesn't matter which one you necessarily start with, but we're going to do the whole lefty-loosey, and then I'm going to do the same with the other bolt here as well. And now I'm ready to grab the other tool. So now we're ready to use our other Shimano crank install tool. It's just going to push straight into the side here. Earlier in this video, I mentioned that this little bolt here is actually made of plastic, so it's quite delicate and fragile. So when you put the tool in there, make sure it goes all the way in. You don't want it to go half in and then just round it. So all the way in, and then again, lefty-loosey, and we're going to take this one all the way out. All right, now that we've got this little piece out, I was saying before earlier in this video that a prick can be helpful. Again, if you don't have a prick, don't buy it just to do this, but if you have a prick, cool. There's a little sort of plastic piece between the two sort of pinches of the crank arm here that we just have to lift up. So now we'll do one off the bike just to show you. So we'll take this plastic piece all the way out and we'll set that to the side. And this was where I was saying that we might be able to use our little prick. There's a little piece of plastic in here that we just want to lift up. Did you see that piece lift just there? Just that little piece there. If you don't have a prick, you can always just use the side of this little part here, just the sort of the little lip that we've got on the edge here, just to sort of slide it into the side and lift it up. And that's lifted the little piece of plastic just there. I've just ran this up like a sort of like a credit card, I suppose, up through that little slot we've got there. Now we should be able to just jiggle the whole thing off on the non-drive side. Now this is a point where I would say try and take a little mental image of if you have any spaces sitting here. See, I can see that I've got one sitting here on the edge of the crank arm here. I need to remember that that was up against the crank on non-drive side. So maybe set up your workstation so that you can remember how the different spaces were, because it's already been set up perfectly. You don't want to damage that. All right, now that we've got non-drive side off, I'll turn the bike around again for the purpose of this video so we can see what's happening here on drive side. Now, my recommendation here is that we put it into the small chainring at the front. After we're in the small chainring here, now that the non-drive side crank is removed, this drive side crank should be able to pull off. Sometimes it can be a little bit stubborn, but my recommendation is to get sort of your 4 fingers in behind the big chainring and your thumb up against the frame, and we're literally just gonna sort of pull it off like that. As we pull it a little bit of the way, I recommend pedaling a bit forward and the chain's gonna drop off, so that now we can pull it the rest of the way out. Congratulations, you've removed your Shimano crank set. Now this might be a really good opportunity to perhaps re-grease the chainring bolts here, or perhaps re-grease the bottom bracket, or whatever it is that you needed to take the cranks off for. Now is your chance to do it because you've obviously got the cranks off. Now I want to talk about how to get them back on. Pretty much the exact same process, completely reversed. So I like to hold the chain forward, making sure that it's past the bottom bracket. If the chain was sitting back here and I put the cranks on, it's not over the crankset yet, which is going to make it quite difficult. So hold the chain forward so that it's past the bottom bracket, and we're just going to slide the crankset back through there sort of as far as we can And then I'm gonna hold the derailleur down just so that there's a bit of slack on the chain, get it back onto that small chainring as we left it before. And now the drive side crank is on, and now we can go and have another look at the non-drive side. All right, and now we'll do non-drive side again. Earlier in this video, I said that it's important to remember where all the spacers were. On this bike, we had an adapter cup sitting inside the bottom bracket. So I've got to get that back in where it was. We had this little spacer here that was sitting between the crank and the bottom bracket, I suppose. And now we're ready to put the crank on. If I'm looking down at the crank arm here, I've got one that's sort of facing down here. This crank arm has to be the complete opposite way. It will be able to fit both ways, but you'll only be able to pedal it one way. So holding the drive side crank still so we're not going to accidentally push it out while we put it on, we're just going to line it up and jiggle it on just like that. And now we can start to tighten it all up again. Now we're going to put our plastic bolt back in here. Now remember, I just said the word plastic then, which means it's incredibly fragile. So when you're starting the thread here, make sure that you start it very softly, nice and tight, just remembering that it's plastic. And then we will push that little pin that we lifted up before with the prick. We're just going to push that back down into place. That's our little safety pin so that if something wasn't tight, the crank's not going to fall off. And now we can tighten up the two 5mm Allen key bolts. Now I recommend tightening one a bit, then the other one a bit, then back and forth, just so that it's even, at an even amount of load between both of the bolts. All right, now that our cranks are back on, what I like to do to test my work is to try shifting between the front chainring again, make sure that it comes up and down, but just the same as it did before. If it's not shifting like it did before, 9 times out of 10, if it's not shifting well, it's probably because you've accidentally forgot to put a spacer back where it was before. A little side note here that I've just had to think about while we were filming as well, is if you need to take the pedals off, it's so much easier to do it while the cranks are still on the bike. If you've taken the cranks off and they're on the workbench, and then you're trying to take the pedals off, it's quite difficult to get enough leverage to actually undo the pedals. So not saying it's impossible, but saying that it's 10 times harder. So if you need to take the pedals off, perhaps you're putting new cranks on your bike, but you still want to keep the pedals with the bike, my recommendation is take them off before you take the cranks off the bike. Another thing worth noting here as well is if you've changed chainring size, there might be variables in the length of your chain or perhaps where the front derailleur sits now. Now this video is really just about how to remove and install your Shimano cranks. So if you want to know more about how to adjust the front derailleur, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to do a video about that as well. Thanks for watching everybody. I hope you've learned about how to remove and install your Shimano cranks on your bike. Hopefully it went well for you working at home. If it didn't, again, there might just be a spacer that's perhaps sitting in the wrong spot. If you reckon that there's anything that we've skipped over in this video, or perhaps a different way that you think that other people might understand it better, let us know in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next video. See you guys.